I'm Welton Gaddy, host of State of Belief Radio, with our continuing coverage of the 2016 Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. It's Tuesday, July 19th, and I'm joined by Noam Neusner, who served as a speechwriter for George W. Bush and is a co-founder of 30 Point Strategies LLC. Mr. Neusner, thanks for being with us.
I am pleased to join you.
Now, with your resume, I'm sure you're expecting this first question, so I'll go ahead and ask it. What do you make of the Melania Trump speech plagiarism accusations?
Well, it's pretty straightforward from where I stand. I think she or somebody who prepared her remarks lifted significant sections of Michelle Obama's '08 speech. I don't think anyone can look at the facts here and come to any other conclusion, and I think it speaks poorly to the professionalism of the campaign at the very least. I'm a little struggling to understand why they are denying what is plainly the case, but that's, I guess, a strategic decision they've made.
So if you were giving the advice, if you were still in the White House and giving advice to another president about this, what would you say tell the press?
Well, I'd probably, if I were the one who was somehow responsible, I'd probably be submitting my letter of resignation rather than any advice. No, because that's what it comes down to. I mean, you know, the speechwriter or whoever works on these remarks has to know what happened, and most likely did exactly as we suspect, which is they thought, at the very least, they liked what Michelle Obama said in '08. They were trying to capture the same tone, maybe the same phrases, and they got sloppy, and they didn't pay enough attention to what they borrowed and what they thought they were just inspired by. I guess I'm trying to be as charitable as I can here. The bottom line is that in the White House, there's a little bit more of a breakwater on these kinds of things. There's more of a review process. I think this is true in every White House. I've spoken to colleagues who've worked for Obama, those who worked for Clinton. There's always fact checkers and people looking around, looking over your shoulder, kind of, backstopping you in many different ways. Now, in a campaign, there's not that kind of architecture built up. So it's not so surprising that these things happen more commonly with campaigns than with, a White House or a similar kind of institution. Mm-hmm. So if I were in the shoes of the lowly speechwriter who did this, I'd feel pretty lousy, and I'd probably resign and take the fall, because the fall would be mine to take. For some reason, the Trump campaign hasn't marched somebody out yet to take the fall, and I'm struggling to understand what the upside is there in that. But they're following their own advice on a lot of things, which I wouldn't do or say, and I'm going to just let them continue to do that.
Sure. Well, the theme for the second day of the GOP convention is Make America Work Again. How powerful do you think the image of Donald Trump as a business genius is in perhaps distracting his supporters from thinking more deeply about fiscal issues and the way federal policies affect them personally?
Yeah, it's an interesting issue. I mean, the whole idea of how Americans feel about work and prosperity and opportunity. Let's set aside Mr. Trump's biography for a second, and even his policies, because frankly, I think they're not necessarily equal to the issue. But I think people of a variety of viewpoints, conservative, liberal, and everything in between, fully recognize that America has an opportunity gap. And some would say we have an income gap, a wealth gap. I'd prefer to call it an opportunity gap, but I think it's a variation on the same theme. There's a lot of people who are doing pretty well, and they've done spectacularly well under President Obama. Rising stock market wealth, rising housing wealth, huge opportunities on the coast. It's a really terrific few years for them. But a significant share of the country is not experiencing that opportunity. It's not experiencing that prosperity. And these are wage earners. These are not people who necessarily lock a lot of their income from the stock market. They simply work paycheck to paycheck. They live paycheck to paycheck. They struggle with a lot of the day-to-days that wealthier people don't really worry about. And so the theme of "Make America Work Again," get America working again, that actually is a real good theme. I think it's actually pretty resonant, and it explains to a certain extent the appeal that Trump has enjoyed with people who feel left out of the prosperity that America has experienced in the last few years. Now, Mr. Trump's got a biography problem, as you pointed out. He's somebody who's and first of all, he at least claims to be very wealthy, and so therefore it's hard to imagine him having a lot of empathy for people who don't have wealth. But that was an issue with with Roosevelt. It wasn't an issue with John Kennedy. It wasn't a trouble with a lot of politicians who have done a great job serving people of low wealth. So the question is, well, what about his bankruptcies? What about his business failures? What about all that? I don't know. I don't think any of that really has resonated with people who you think would be particularly sensitive to it. Mm-hmm. There seems to be something else that's appealing about Trump and his business acumen, such as it is, for voters who are frustrated, and I don't think that they're paying attention to those kinds of details. It may be frustrating. It may be frustrating as somebody who thinks that biography matters, but I sort of have to detach myself from what I think and what I believe to what I think, what others are thinking and believing, and I think the facts speak for themselves. Right now, Mr. Trump is benefiting dramatically from his appeal to people who feel left out, and that especially includes people who feel left out economically.
This may be you give the same answer to this question, but I'm wondering, as a lifelong communications professional, how you would explain the way Donald Trump connects with his audiences. I see him breaking all of the rules, and yet it seems to work for him.
Yeah, I think that actually that may be his appeal, is that he's breaking all of the rules. I read a very, very powerful essay. It was on Medium, and I can't remember who wrote it, but I'll have to look it up while we're talking. And basically, it looks at the problem that you're seeing among people who really feel left behind. America's prosperity, and it was a piece by a guy named Chris Arnade, Arnade. It's on Medium.com. It's pretty strong, and it was posted back in May, so it's easy to get. So the key point that Arnade points out is that when you are sitting on this end of America's socioeconomic spectrum, where you are left out, where you're feeling like people are passing you by, where you're not valued, not just economically, but socially, where being on a lower end of the spectrum means that you have no worth. You kind of don't really care about the rules. You don't mind basically breaking all the rules, breaking up all the institutions that you hold as responsible for your own situation. It's actually interesting when you look at Michelle Obama's speech in 2008. She actually talks about this a little bit. She talks about how poverty in America, poor people are not treated to have any value, whereas in other societies they sometimes are. It's a powerful point, and Trump seems to be tapping into that. Maybe it's because he basically doesn't care what the institutional elites think. That is a signal. He's like, look, I don't care. And if you're somebody who also doesn't care what the institutional elites think, you culturally feel like he gets you. And he gets you in a way that no other politician possibly can, because, let's face it, he's not a politician. I mean, he might act like one right now, but he has none of the qualities that a politician normally has.
Noam Neusner, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Great comments. I appreciate you being here. I'm Welton Gaddy for State of Belief Radio.